So hi everyone, I'm
Hi,
Kynan.
Kynan.
um, those of you who don't know me, my name is Kynan. I am one of the committee members for the Association of Engaged Buddhists, and I'm also presenting the talk tonight, the Dharma talk and meditation. So thanks for joining, I really appreciate it. So I'd like to just begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, which is the Gadigal and Wungal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Yeah, maybe just as a little introduction, for those of you who aren't familiar with the association, we try to create a supportive environment, supportive community for the study of Dharma and meditation. We are supported by our spiritual director, Bhante Teja Damo, and we hope to address the needs of the wider community with a non-dogmatic approach to Buddhist meditation practice. What I wanted to do tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit about some different approaches to understanding the Four Noble Truths, or understanding this sort of quite central teaching in the Buddhist tradition, particularly in the Theravadan tradition, but found throughout many different forms of Buddhism. So we are recording. It will mostly just be me, and I think we do edit out anything else. But if you are concerned about being recorded, please let me know. You can either post in the chat or send me a direct message, and we can make sure that you don't appear. Okay, so yeah, basically what I want to talk about is there's a sort of numbered series here that I put in the title. One teaching, two arrows, three poisons, and four noble truths. And there's this great quote where the Buddhist historian Robert Thurman says that Christians love God and Buddhists love lists. And I've always loved that so much. It's kind of true. Buddhists do love their lists. Interestingly, Robert Thurman is the father of Uma Thurman, the actress from Kill Bill, but that's a side note. Part of this is the oral tradition of the Buddhist teachings. In the time of the Buddha, the teachings were not written down; they were transmitted orally, and so the lists were a mnemonic device. But also, it does help with understanding the teaching, separating it out into different parts, looking at it from different angles, different numbers, different sort of features of the teaching. So I think this is a useful way to frame it. Okay, so in terms of the structure for tonight, I want to just talk a bit about this concept, and then I want to do a fairly moderate to medium length guided meditation. Maybe if we could meditate for 20 to 30 minutes. I'll check in with everyone before we do that if people are feeling up for that. And then at the end, I'd like to have time for questions and a bit more discussion. Okay, so the Buddha taught that he said often that he taught one thing and one thing only, which was the cessation of suffering, or put another way, suffering and the cessation of suffering. And this was really key and central to his teaching philosophy. As far as I can tell from reading the Pali Canon, from reading commentaries, from reading texts about the Buddha, he was really very much an empiricist. He found something about his own experience that was life-changing. It was radically shifted his view of himself and of the world and his experience of the world. And from him discovering this himself, he found that it would also apply to others and therefore wanted to share this teaching. And so he was very much an empiricist. He discovered something in his own experience and then wanted to share that. He was trying very hard to not found a religion, and I think he failed spectacularly. But the plus side of it is that the teachings have survived until our time, which is obviously an excellent resource for us. And so when the Buddha is giving his teachings, he's really framing this around suffering and the cessation of suffering. What leads to the cessation of suffering? If questions were posed to the Buddha that were too academic, he would refuse to answer them. He kept coming back to this question of what actually changes your experience for the better, what leads to well-being, what leads to happiness, what leads to peace. And so I think this is a really important framing. The two arrows is a very I think it's a wonderful teaching. It's a sutta in the Pali Canon that says that when a uninstructed worldling, a patujana, is struck by a painful feeling, so some kind of physical or perhaps even emotional pain. When they're struck by a painful feeling, they're struck by two arrows. The first arrow is the pain of the physical or the emotional event. And the second arrow is the mental arrow. It's the resistance to that experience. It's the wanting things to be different. When someone who is trained in the path, trained in meditation, is struck by a painful feeling, they are only struck by the first arrow. They might experience the painful feeling, but they don't experience the mental resistance to it. And so I think this, if we look at this, it's a very direct way to try and understand what the Buddha has been talking about with the cessation of suffering. The analogy I like to use here is if you stub your toe. I think all of us have done this at some point. You do something a little silly. Maybe you step in the wrong direction, or you don't realize there was a chair there. You stub your toe. And stubbing your toe hurts. It's definitely a painful physical sensation. But I know for me, when I've stubbed my toe in the past, I usually start thinking like, oh, that was dumb. Why did I do that? Or I start getting this feeling of, oh, this is painful. I wish it wasn't like this. I wish the pain would go away. And what it turns out is that if you can, at least at times, or to some degree, let go of the mental resistance, the wanting things to be different, the pain of the physical sensations is not that bad. It's actually quite bearable. It turns out that what is prolonging the pain and what is solidifying it, what is turning it into difficulty, is the mental resistance. It's that wanting things to be different. It's that trying to push unpleasant things away. And so this could be thought of in terms of the Four Noble Truths. I'm not going to go in depth into the Four Noble Truths. It's a wonderful teaching, but I really just want to extract the kind of core idea from it. And so I'll just sort of skim through the Four Noble Truths. I'm sure all of you have heard this teaching before. The first noble truth is that life is suffering, death is suffering, old age and sickness are suffering. To be with what is not desired is suffering. To be apart from what is desired is suffering. In short, the five aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. And so of course, I'm using the word suffering there. I feel like suffering is an appropriate translation. The Pali, in some cases, the Pali word is dukkha. Maybe actually I should use the word dukkha instead. Suffering is the translation that we most commonly find. Other translations might be stress or unsatisfactoriness. And I think unsatisfactoriness kind of is the key thrust of what I'm trying to get at here. What the Buddha is saying in the first noble truth is that the unsatisfactoriness is present throughout many of our experiences. The second noble truth is the cause of dukkha, the cause of this unsatisfactoriness. And the Pali word for this is taṇhā. The translations that we, taṇhā is, the literal translation is thirst, but the translations we might more commonly find are craving or craving and aversion, craving being the like wanting to get something and aversion being the pushing away. We might also use the word clinging or attachment, especially for the more coarse forms of this. And of course, there's a spectrum here of taṇhā, where it's very, very coarse, like very obvious, and times when it's very subtle. And so the Buddha is saying that taṇhā is the cause of dukkha. The third noble truth is that the dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness, there can be an end to it. It is possible to reach an end to it. It is possible for the cessation of dukkha. And this is through the cessation of taṇhā. If we remove taṇhā, we also remove dukkha. If we remove craving, we also remove unsatisfactoriness or suffering. And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. This is where things get a little, the list has a sub-list in it, so it gets more complicated. But the Eightfold Path is the way to practice towards this. Okay, so if we were to take the key essence of the Four Noble Truths, my teacher, Tucker Peck, he likes to say, taṇhā causes dukkha, so stop it, which is a great teaching. Not going to be useful for a lot of students. Another thing that you might hear a lot that is also at times very unhelpful is just let go. If you just let go of the craving, if you just let go of the wanting things to be different, then things will be better. There will be less dukkha. There'll be less suffering, less unsatisfactoriness. So these teachings, just let go. Taṇhā causes dukkha, so stop it. These teachings are not going to be helpful a lot of the time. And this is why we have particular techniques that we work on. This is why we cultivate these qualities of mind. We develop stable attention. We develop mindfulness. We develop equanimity so that we can actually see this unfolding in our own experience. And so, yeah, the key thrust of these Four Noble Truths is that there is something that we're doing that we most of the time will not realize we're doing at all. It won't be on a conscious level. It won't be on an intentional level where we are choosing to do it. But there is something we're doing, and this is a kind of action that's happening that causes us to hold on to experiences and either want them to be, we want them to be different in some way. So craving, grabbing onto an experience, trying to hold on to it, or aversion, pushing away an experience. And if we think about this, this is quite a radical way to think about things. So the Buddha really was giving this teaching in this kind of medical model, the diagnosis, this is what dukkha is. What is the cause of it? The cause of it is taṇhā. What is the treatment? What is the sort of, what would be the result? How can we come out of this? And that's for the cessation of dukkha through the cessation of taṇhā. And then the treatment plan is the Eightfold Path. And so the question then becomes, how do we stop doing this? How do we understand what is going on there? And so, like I said, the taṇhā that we're doing is not something we can just decide to stop doing. In fact, trying to stop the taṇhā is more taṇhā. It's trying to change the experience from what it actually is to something else. And so this is why there is the Eightfold Path. This is why there is the practices and the cultivation of mind, the cultivation of these qualities that can allow us to see this in our own experience. The Buddha taught that the reason we do this taṇhā is because there is a kind of fundamental delusion with how we see the world, how we see what is happening in our lives, in our experience. And this fundamental delusion is what is perfectly correlated to taṇhā. So in my lists, so I said we've got 1 teaching, 2 arrows, and 3 poisons. This is where we come to the 3 poisons. The 3 poisons being craving, aversion, and delusion. Sometimes it's given in an alternate format, which is greed, hatred, and ignorance. And so the Buddha taught that there is a sort of fundamental delusion that prevents us from knowing that we're doing this thing. It keeps us repeating the same actions. It keeps us tied up in actions that have taṇhā, that bring dukkha. And this is a delusion in the way things are. So this is where we start to get into insight, and this is where we start to get into understanding something different about the world from how we might typically perceive it. Okay, so I actually want to sort of just wrap up this discussion a little bit and move into the meditation part. And I will talk a little bit more later. As a sort of final thought, I just want to talk a little bit about my experience. So I started meditating after a period of quite bad mental health, mostly depression and anxiety. I'd moved to Sydney. I was living in a new city. I had a lot of good things going on in my life. And I found myself in this period of bad mental health. And as I looked around, I realized that I felt really bad. It did not feel good at all. But if I looked at what my life was, the things that I had, I had a partner, I had a house to live in, I had a study that I was doing, I had friends, I had work that I enjoyed. If I looked at the things that made up my life, they were pretty good. Objectively, my experience was a good one. But subjectively, I felt terrible. I did not feel good. I couldn't enjoy the things that I had. And I think I distinctly remember this kind of moment. I think it was as I was coming out of depression through other, I was doing therapy and different behavior changes, lifestyle changes that really helped with the depression. As I was coming out of the depression, I had this moment of realization of, well, there must be something that I am doing that is causing this objectively good situation to become this subjectively bad situation. There must be some way that my mind engages with the different things that are happening to turn what, by the standards of basically everyone I know, turns something that quite good by those standards into something that felt really bad. And this is where I decided, okay, I'm going to look into meditation. Meditation is a way of working with the mind, and I want to learn about how my mind works, and I want to learn about what it is that I'm doing that's turning this situation into a situation that's filled with difficulty and suffering. And so I think over the course of practice over the last years, I guess primarily the last sort of 5-6 years, I found that through meditation, it certainly is possible to notice more and more how my mind does these particular things that cause things to become very tight and very solid, and to create this taṇhā, create craving and aversion. And it is possible through practice to gradually shift how I'm seeing so that I can actually see things more clearly, see things with less delusion, with less ignorance. And this teaching, I think, should remain kind of central. This teaching of letting go of taṇhā, letting go of craving, it's a really hard one. If you find yourself in situations where you might know that there's a lot of this going on, but it's hard to know how to let go of it. Or you might actually not know that the taṇhā, the craving and aversion is happening. So it makes the practice of it kind of difficult. But this teaching really shows that it's not about achieving certain states in meditation. It's not about trying to reach some particular goal. It's about understanding how the mind works. It's about understanding how craving and aversion function and how your experience is produced by the way that you are engaging with it, how the mind is perceiving the world. So with that, I'd like to do a meditation. I was hoping to do, we do have a fair bit of time left, so I was hoping to do maybe 20 or 25 minutes, something like that. Does anyone here object to doing that long? Okay, I figure everyone's probably pretty comfortable. Maybe we'll even go up to 30. You know, I know at this time slot, sometimes if there's a bit of, you've eaten dinner, it can be a bit of a sleepy time to meditate. But let's press on and see how we go. Okay, so I'm going to guide us through a meditation. So if you want to adjust how you're sitting, get into a comfortable posture, please do so now. And as you come into your meditation posture, just notice how even this simple act of placing the body in a certain way and creating this time and space to practice, and this simple act already may start to bring a different quality to your experience. You might notice that as you sit or lie down, however your body is positioned, you might notice a sense of stability, a sense of ease, and a sense of presence. And for this meditation practice, I'll invite you to stay as still and quiet as feels comfortable for you for the duration of this practice. And so to begin, I'd like you to come into your present moment experience. Notice if there are any external sounds. Maybe you can hear sounds of cars, people, animals. Notice if there are any body sensations present for you, and particularly noticing any sensations in the hands, and noticing the feeling of being supported, that solidity holding you up, being supported by chair or cushion, floor or bed. And also notice the current mind state, how you're feeling. Whatever's there is perfectly fine. Notice if there are any prevalent thoughts. Notice if there is any particular quality of mind that's present for you now. And now bring your attention to the sensations of the breath. I'm going to offer some instructions here, but if you have a particular practice that you like to do for settling, calming the body and mind, feel free to use that. And as I give these instructions, feel free to make adjustments so that the practice works for you. And so bring your attention to the sensations of the breath. You might like to observe these sensations at the edges of the nostrils, or perhaps the sensations at the upper lip, Or you might like to observe the rising and falling of the abdomen, or the breath throughout the whole body. It can be helpful to just pick one location and observe the sensations there. And when you bring attention to these sensations, it's just a decision, a mental movement to bring those sensations into the foreground, into the center of your conscious experience. And you may find rather quickly that something else will move into this foreground. And whenever you notice that the mind has moved away, simply appreciate the moment of awareness. Be glad that you noticed. And then gently bring attention back. Just decide to bring the sensations back into the foreground. It doesn't matter how many times you do this. Every time you bring attention back, it's training the mind, moving towards calm, stable attention. And there's one more trick that can really help. As you place attention on the breath, you don't need to get rid of any experience. Simply let all sounds, all body sensations, all mental activity, just allow all of that to be in the background. The breath in the foreground, allow everything else to arise and pass away in the background. It's like having a conversation with a friend in a loud cafe. You don't need to tell all the other people to be quiet. You simply tune in to what your friend is saying. And so here we just bring attention to the breath, let it be in the foreground, and allow everything else to be in the background. Good. And so now what I'll invite you to do is to let go of the breath and see if you can just notice whatever is prominent in your experience. Notice if there are sounds, body sensations, or thoughts, mental activity. And particularly notice what draws your attention. And with whatever is prominent, whatever you're noticing in your experience, see if you can notice the feeling tone, the Vedana. This is the valence of positive or negative. Some experiences, some sensations we want, we will pull them towards us, and some we don't want, and we might try and push them away. So see if you can notice the Vedana, this feeling tone. You could use the label positive or negative, or even want or don't want. And just notice what's coming up for you and how the mind reacts to it. And as you notice this Vedana, this sense of positive or negative, this wanting or not wanting, you might also notice the mind moving towards things that are pleasant, moving away from things that are unpleasant. You might notice that this movement has a slight feeling of tension to it, slight feeling of clinging. Perhaps it just feels a little tight, a little tense, or it feels like a reaction. If you don't notice this, simply keep observing the Vedana, the positive or negative. If you do notice this slight urge to move, this slight feeling of wanting or not wanting, then the next step is to try and relax this sense of clinging, relax this sense of tightness. And there's two ways we can do this. The first is to relax the body. See if the mind can let go and the body can relax and soften. And the second suggestion is to practice acceptance, accepting and welcoming whatever experience is present for you, just as it is, without needing to change at all. Just noticing whatever that experience is and trying to allow it to be just as it is. So continue noticing Vedana. If you observe clinging, either relax the body and let go, or try to just accept those sensations, accept that experience exactly as it is. over and over, again and again, opening up awareness to notice this Vedana sense of push and pull, any degree of clinging, seeing if you can relax the body or welcome and accept that experience, letting go of clinging. Nice work, everyone. Take a minute to gently come out of the meditation, might like to stretch or move around a little bit. So I'd like to just take a bit of time here to see if anyone has any comments, reflections, or questions. So you can feel free to unmute. It'd be also great to see you if you are able to turn your camera on, or you can post in the chat if there's anything that you'd like to share. So yeah, I'd like to open the floor. Does anyone have any thoughts or perhaps reflections on the practice or anything they'd like to share?
Oh, just I found it very pleasant and a bit disappointed when the bell rang there, mate. I'd like to have gone on for a bit longer.
Well, that's good feedback.
Yeah, but I was in a very comfortable space, just concentrating on the breathing. There's nothing much coming to my attention, but yeah, I do suffer a bit of pain, so that sometimes comes to mind, but yeah, I can usually eradicate it. So I guess that's a pleasing thing.
So Bill, you have some pain like from sitting, pain that you feel in the body, but you found ways to work with it.
Yeah, sitting down is painful for me, yes. Yeah, anywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, and what did you find when that came up in this meditation?
Well, yeah, really by concentrating on my breathing and just in and out, and I don't know, it's just something I've never really tried before. I'm breathing in through the nose, and it makes sense letting the breath go out through my body and out of my toes. And just by doing that, I forgot about the pain.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of meditation, well, something that a lot of people will experience with meditation is that if you can ignore your problems, a lot of them will go away eventually. Perhaps we could call it skillfully ignoring. In the meditation practice, we can focus on the breath. It creates this sort of pleasant, wholesome quality. And the other things in our experience can sort of drop away from that, or they're not bothering us as much. Sounds like that's what you're experiencing, Bill. Okay, great. Anything else?
Yes.
Frank, hey, we can see
you. My computer is finished, so that's why my face is not appearing properly. But I have a question. It was a very nice half an hour. I felt so happy. And I learned, I think, one thing you might agree with. Vedana, feeling. It's just a thought. But we take it so seriously because when you are hurt in the family or whatever, hurtful feeling in you, you reject it. It's only a thought. We feel it so much that it becomes pain instead of knowing that it's just a thought. And thoughts are coming and going. And we identify with the feeling that feeling is me, I, and it hurts. So I thank you very much for that. And one more comment, if I may. I've been a Buddhist more than 50 years, and I had no education ever, but I'm learning nonstop. And I forgot about the 2 arrows. It's very helpful. Because what you don't practice, you forget. Yeah, the 2 arrows that we reject, whatever comes, the pain in the body, and then the mind takes over the pain also. I had a hip replacement not long ago, and so I know what pain is. For 2 months, I couldn't sleep practically. And I took some tablets. I never stopped vomiting. Really bad. Some nights I slept 1 or 2 hours from the pain. And I wish I knew it then, that I don't identify with the pain, with the physical pain. I don't cling to it. So it was really helpful. And your assessment of the Four Noble was really fantastic. Sometimes I'd like to talk to people about the Buddhist. My English is not very
Frank,
fast.
Frank, that's really well said, actually. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I think one of the things you brought up is that sometimes we need to hear these same things many times. What we don't hear very often, or what we, doesn't come to mind, we don't remember, we need to hear it again. And I think I've heard my teacher say the same thing tens or even hundreds of times, and it still comes back to me differently the next time I hear it. I learn something different. And I think one of the reminders that my teacher often says that really helps when I hear it again and again is that, with meditation, we're trying to get good at all the mind states. We're trying to be able to handle difficulty with grace, to be able to work with the situation we find ourselves in. And so that reminder really helps me a lot. And I think as well, Frank, what you were saying about the Vedana, the feeling tone, that quality very quickly can become something very real and very solid for us. And it can be something that we react to very strongly. Maybe at times we get more space, more mindfulness, and we can see, oh yeah, these mental processes, they're just arising and passing. These emotions, these feeling tones, they're arising and passing. I don't need to identify with them. I don't need to cling to them. And then so often we, as we move through life, that capacity to see that, the mindfulness might drop, and then suddenly we're identified again. And I really think the practice is about remembering. The word for mindfulness in Pali is sati, which shares the same root as the word to remember. And so I keep thinking like, yes, it is at a certain point, the practice is just about remembering. It's remembering this insight, remembering that wisdom of noticing these thoughts and emotions as being temporary, arising and passing. Yeah, I also just wanted to add something else, but I just want to check. I think I saw someone else unmuting before. I just want to check if anyone else has anything they'd like to add at this point. Okay, I'll say a little more, and then we'll see if if there's anything from the group. There's this. I think the 2 arrows teaching is really great. I think it's so succinct. It really points to something that most people, I think, can really relate to this teaching. Another formulation of this that I really like is by the American teacher Shinzen Young. And he says that suffering equals pain times resistance. So he gives this mathematical equation for it. Suffering equals pain times resistance. And so what this teaching means is that there will be pain. This is inevitable in life. What can you expect if you have a human body, as Bhante likes to say? Pain is inevitable, but the suffering is optional. If we can reduce the resistance, even reducing the resistance a little bit, because the pain is multiplied by the resistance, reducing the resistance even a little bit will reduce the suffering by a lot. And also, if we can reduce the resistance to 0, there will be no suffering. So I think this equation is quite a good way to formulate this. I also just wanted to say something about the spectrum of experiences here. So I guess to bring this back to the practice, the practice of meditation, the practice of how the Dharma can help us in our lives, we will experience a spectrum of taṇhā. So at the coarsest level, we will see ourselves being attached to things. We'll see this clinging, we'll see ourselves grasping towards things, or we'll see ourselves pushing experiences away. And sometimes this can be very obvious. And this is the far end of the spectrum. At the near end of the spectrum, the experience of taṇhā is very subtle. This is just this very small mental movement that's sort of going towards or away from something, maybe like thinking of it as like leaning. And what we're trying to do in meditation is we calm the mind and bring about more settledness, more peace, and perhaps more focus. And it allows us to see the taṇhā at progressively more subtle levels. So noticing it first at the coarsest levels, then noticing it more subtle, and being able to let go of it at progressively more subtle levels. And I think this is one of the amazing things about meditation practice, is how it can unfold progressively, how even a little bit of it can bring some relief, but more of it can bring more relief. The other thing I just wanted to mention was, I was talking a little bit about delusion, and I think I could just clarify that a little bit. The taṇhā that we're talking about here is the craving or aversion that has a delusive element to it. It's the craving or aversion that doesn't see cause and effect. It doesn't see the conditions of the world correctly, doesn't see it clearly. And so this, when we define it this way, we're not removing the wholesome desire. I think this is a really important point, especially for us, for most of us here who are lay people. We have to engage in the world, and we want to engage in the world, particularly like we will be pulled by wholesome desire at times. And what we're talking about here with taṇhā is the delusive craving. It's not the wholesome desire. There's many, many motivations that aren't taṇhā. And my example that I always give for this is the Dalai Lama is surely someone who has worked a lot to reduce craving, reduce taṇhā. And he doesn't sit around doing nothing all day. He goes out and wins the Nobel Peace Prize and does a lot of good in the world. So the delusion here that we're talking about is mistaking cause and effect, or not seeing causes and conditions correctly. And so the example I like to give here is, say that there's a cupcake that you want to eat. Say it's vegan, gluten-free, sugar-free cupcake. You can eat it. You want to eat this cupcake. If you feel like eating the cupcake will satisfy your every desire, it will make you permanently happy, it's the one thing that you are missing to make your life complete, then that is the kind of delusive craving, right? We all know that a cupcake can't be that good. If you experience this, what you can do is you can notice this happening. You can notice this sort of like feeling of like, oh, I need to get that. And you can actually watch it. And usually if you can pause and watch it, the craving will go up and it'll peak in intensity, and then it'll drop down. And similarly in meditation, you might notice the urge to move, And sometimes you'll, you might feel a little discomfort, you might think about moving, and the intensity of the urge will go up and up and up, and then it'll stop, it'll come down. So if you notice this, say we've got our cupcake, you notice this urge to eat the cupcake, and yeah, it's gonna fulfill my every need. And you feel that desire go up and then drop back down. Then once that urge drops, you can actually see the cupcake more clearly. You can see like, oh, okay, that's something I can eat that might taste kind of good. It might give me a little sugary buzz, but it won't necessarily fulfill my every desire. And then that's a kind of more clear seeing. It's more in line with reality. It's not propelled by this delusive taṇhā, this delusive craving. And this is how we can sort of work with this in everyday life. If you notice that feeling of like, I must get this thing, if it's possible to actually just pause and wait and let that feeling settle, and maybe even let that taṇhā peak and then subside, and then you can choose what action feels appropriate. And sometimes that action is eating the cupcake, especially if you're at a friend's party and they've made it for you or something like that. So yeah, this is my thought, is like the craving we're talking about is the delusive craving. It's not the wholesome desire. There's many motivations for things. It's just that they're often tied together. And it's through meditation practice that we can more clearly see this. We can see the spectrum of clinging and taṇhā and craving, and gradually release what is possible in those moments. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Does anyone want to check in about their practice? I'm always happy to talk practice and meditation technical questions. The floor is open.
Kynan, when you asked us, excuse me, in the meditation practice to just tune into whatever was most present to us, I tuned into the sound of my neighbour's pond, which is just downstairs, and the filter is going, so I can hear the water burbling and dropping, and then when you asked us what the feeling tone of that was, I thought it's very, very difficult to decide what the feeling tone of this is. It's quite a pleasant sound. On the other hand, maybe silence would be nicer. But I devoted quite a lot of time to trying to figure out what the feeling tone was, and I never came to a conclusion.
Oh, that's great, Sue. Do you have any sense now of whether it's positive or negative for you?
I think it's a mild positive, but I don't feel any need, to sit beside it for many, many hours a day or anything like that. It's quite pleasant to have it there in the background. That's as far as I could go.
Yeah.
But it's a very clear, distinct sound, and you can hear it very clearly from here.
I think what tends to happen with the feeling tone after practicing for a long time is that it tends to sort of track more towards neutral for most things, and then there'll still be some things that clearly stand out, but there'll be more things that are just sort of somewhere near neutral. Like if we had a spectrum from -10 to +10, it's hovering around the zero, a bit above, bit below.
If we had done this at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is when I usually do my practice, that is the time when every garbage truck goes past and every fire alarm goes off in the street. It would have been a lot easier to establish the feeling tone.
Great. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks.
Yeah, Vongzi, am I saying that right?
Yes, yes, that's right. Yes. Hello, Kynan. Nice to join with you and everyone else.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I came a bit late, so I wasn't able to listen to the beginning parts of your talk, which I'm very, very grateful for. But anyway, I just wanted to ask a question about my meditation practice, actually.
Mhm.
I find that as I'm going along and trying to put my attention on the breathing in and out and try my best not to, think of other things and always pulling myself back to the breath. After a while, I feel a little bit dizzy. It's almost as if I sense that my body is like, it's like in a different shape or something. But I'm not really fully on the breath yet. So is that something I should just ignore and just keep coming back to the breath? Or is it something that's more of a concern?
Yeah, so this is actually quite common. I would say that I hear about this a lot. So distorted bodily perceptions or shifts in that sense of like balance or the sense of where your body is located. Some people report like feeling like their hands are giant, or like that they're a giant, or that their body feels really small, or they feel like they're falling over, or they can't tell if they're like horizontal or vertical, or just that sense of dizziness. Is this sort of sounding like what you're experiencing, Wangzi?
Yes, yes, I think so. Yes.
Okay, cool. So it seems like this is one of the things that kind of happens as the mind becomes, let's say, more like aligned, more unified. So we've got this word in Pali, samadhi, which generally, sometimes it's used to refer to concentration, but it actually means more like collectedness. Like we're bringing all the parts of the mind together. We're bringing the capacities of the mind into alignment. And it seems like as this happens, some parts of the mind kind of they have different responses to this process. And so there's a sort of spectrum of different experiences that can happen as part of the training of the mind, part of this development. With the dizziness, does it feel like disruptive to you? Does it make it hard to focus?
No, it's not. It's not disruptive. It's just something that's there, and I notice it. I can come back to the breath
Okay,
easily.
cool.
It's just something that I just thought it was strange, and it always happens sort of when I'm more well advanced into the time. Like for example, it happens maybe like towards an hour or something like that of meditation.
Yeah, that makes sense. It usually happens as you sort of get a bit deeper. So you're saying that it's not too disruptive, and it sounds like it's also not too unpleasant. Is that right?
It's not unpleasant, but I always have this urge to just open my eyes to see where where my body is at.
Yeah,
As if my head's like crooked or something like that,
yeah, cool. So when there's weird or different experiences in meditation, it makes sense to get excited about it, or like want to see what's going on, or want to check it out. And as these experiences happen more, they'll just become more everyday, and you can be more like equanimous with them, I suppose. With this particular one that you're bringing up, what I like to suggest is seeing if you can just stay with it, seeing if it's possible to stay with the meditation, and see if you can notice anything that feels pleasant about it. So perhaps there's a certain lightness to the experience. Maybe the shift in perception feels kind of interesting or good. Or maybe there's even like a sense of relief that you don't have to be as much in your body. There's more of a sense of like, sorry, I phrased that wrongly. the body doesn't feel as fixed in space. It feels a bit more light, a bit lighter, that sort of structure of the body, the shape of the body. And if you can notice something pleasant about it, you can sort of keep going with the meditation and let that just be sort of in the background. How does that sound to you?
Yes, I think I can do that. I might just explore it more next time it happens, just see how it goes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, there can be other sort of unusual experiences that might just be worth mentioning. There might be sort of colors and lights that appear even when you have closed eyes. There can be a sound, like a pleasant ringing sound, and there can also be like the feeling like the body wants to move, or that there's sort of like slight movements of the body as you're sitting in meditation. Have you come across any of these?
No, not yet. No.
Okay, so maybe just a little like precautionary warning that sometimes this sort of stuff will also manifest in other ways. And just to know that this is perfectly normal for meditation. It can be quite unusual and feel strange, but it's nothing to worry about. Just that, it's helpful to check in with a teacher or with other people in your meditation community if things feel strange or unusual. Yeah, just this is actually a sign that progress is being made. So it's a good little reminder that something is happening. The mind is being trained.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We've just got a few more minutes. I just want to check if anyone has anything else that they'd like to say or add, or any questions that you have. Yeah, Bill.
Hey, I've read online that you are doing a fairly long retreat in the not too distant future, but I noticed that it's a silent one, and I'm fairly inexperienced with meditation. I've never been on a retreat before. So is it 8 or 10 days, whatever you're doing? It seems like a long time to me to keep my mouth shut. You got any thoughts there?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. So it's a traditional Buddhist format for the retreats to be held in noble silence. And so noble silence means that you will refrain from speaking unless it's necessary, or it's important for you to speak. And so the first time I did noble silence was my first retreat, which was a 10-day retreat, the Vipassana in Blackheath. And what I found was when I went into noble silence, it felt like a massive relief. And a lot of people report this as well, that having a shared agreement with everybody else there, that you will only speak when necessary, means that you know that you don't need to speak, and you know that no one expects you to speak. And so you can actually go about your activities with this sort of, you can shift more of your attention inwards. You can focus more on your practice, focus more on mindfulness, bring more awareness to what's going on. And you don't have to worry about how you communicate, how you interact. So this is the way I like to do noble silence, as like this shared agreement. You can, of course, talk to the teacher, and you will talk to the teacher every day. So on these retreats, the retreats that I do, I try to make sure everyone feels like they can see me as much as they want to. So we will have interviews probably every day or every second day, and there'll be office hours, and there will be a Dharma talk. So there will be an opportunity to ask questions or check in. So you do still have guidance, you do still have support. It's just that you won't have the social feeling of like needing to talk to others, particularly other retreatants. And yeah, most people who do this actually find that the silence feels quite good, and that it's actually kind of a relief to not speak, and that they can use that to help deepen the practice. I can understand that, you know, it seems like a lot to go on. So this retreat that I'm doing in April is, it's called a 10-day retreat. It's actually from like Friday to the following Sunday. So it's like, it's 8 full days with a day of arriving and a day of departing. It seems like a long time, but this is a pretty common format. A lot of people do it, and particularly this one that I'm doing, I really want to make sure that you feel as supported as you need to feel for the retreat. So that's how I'd think about it. If you want to talk any more about this, Bill, I'd be happy to have a chat maybe at some other time. But how does that sound for now?
Yeah. Well, I'm quite keen to do one. You know, I'm not sure if it's good to start with a longer one, or maybe a 3-day retreat to, you know, put my toe into the water.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a personality style choice. You know, do you like to dive in and just do the whole thing, or do you want to like build up to it? And you know, it's definitely a good option to do, like, you know, do a 1-day retreat, do a 3-day retreat, and work up to it. But you can also just jump in and do the 10-day. I know a lot of people will just do that as their first retreat experience. And I think as long as you have that sense of support, then you know that you can do it. So we've hit time. So thank you, everybody. I'm just going to post the info for how you can support the association. If you would like to give dana, we're entirely run by volunteers, and we rely on dana. We rely on the generosity of people in the past to offer these teachings, and if you can offer any dana, it helps support the teaching and the community activities in the future. So yeah, as mentioned, I'm running a retreat in April from the 21st to the 30th. So it's a 10-day retreat at Vajrasala in the Southern Highlands. And we've also got Bhante Akaliko is leading a 3-day retreat. That's at the Easter weekend. So also at Vajrasala. And that will be another excellent opportunity to try out a retreat. Megan, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, thank you for a lovely talk this evening, Kynan, and for a lovely opportunity to practice together. That was really helpful. Next week, I think we have Sue offering a teaching. So we look forward to that, Sue, very much.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you.
Yes.
And I look forward to seeing everyone again next week.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Kynan.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kynan.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Here we are.